Coming up, we were able to catch up with Father Richard McNeillie, director of the Office of Vocations, for a brief interview in the midst of all of his travels and work, promoting vocations, visiting seminarians, helping with discernment, and more. Welcome to Around the Archdiocese.
Sharing information, insights, and stories about our Catholic faith from across the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston, you're listening to Around the Archdiocese. Here's your host, Sean O'Driscoll.
Hello and welcome. My name is Sean O'Driscoll. I'm blessed to serve as the Senior Communications Manager here for the Archdiocese and serve as the host of this program. Now, this is an episode that we wish we could have done several weeks ago, back when it was National Vocations Awareness Week. But this guy is so hard to pin down with his schedule. In fact, this is going to be a shorter episode because you don't have a lot of time today. You're constantly on the move. And I'm speaking, of course, with my colleague, Father Richard McNeillie, director of the Office of Vocations for the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Father, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everybody.
Thanks for spending time with us today.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It probably was my fault that this is a little late because I was out of town on National Vocations Awareness Week, so we couldn't do this podcast.
But you were out of town because, well, your position as the director encompasses quite a lot, if I understand correctly. What does a typical day look like for you? Or let me back up. Is there a typical day in the life of a vocations director?
Yeah, there's probably not. And it's good to point out that I am not just the director of the vocations office, but I'm also the director of seminarians. So I spend a lot of time visiting seminarians. Managing is probably not the right word. Sometimes I refer to myself as like their manager in kind of like a baseball kind of way. But I'm, support. I'm somebody who follows up with them and kind of checks in on them, seeing how they're doing. We get an annual report from their seminaries, and not everybody's at St. Mary's. I think that's what confuses people.
I think that is confusing because we hear, well, there's a seminarian, but he's not over at St. Mary's. He's not here in town. So how is he still a seminarian for our diocese?
Yeah, so seminaries are like schools, and we can send them out to various schools or seminaries. One of the things that's probably helpful to know is that the St. Mary's Seminary only handles what we now call configuration stage, which is where they learn their theology. It's kind of like the graduate level of seminary. It's the seminary they go to before they get ordained, but it's not the seminary they usually start at. Some guys can start there if they've already met a lot of prerequisites and done a lot of work already.
So this would be like a background in philosophy, basic theology, before they are able to sort of get to, that analogy of a graduate level study.
Yeah, that's correct. Although we don't want to conflate all of what we do to just the academics, but it's definitely a part of it. So if you don't have a college degree, you can't go to St. Mary's yet. You really have to go somewhere else. But there's a lot of other work that they do in training the man how to pray and some of the basic rhythms and habits that a seminarian needs. They do that work at these other seminaries. We send to 6 seminaries in total, including St. Mary's.
Wow.
And in that case, I was out of town, I think the week before I was in Dallas. There's a seminary called Holy Trinity Seminary there at the University of Dallas. And then there's another seminary that we're sending to in Conception, Missouri. It's part of a monastery, Conception Abbey. And so I was in Missouri, in rural Missouri, in Conception Abbey at their seminary when we had National Vocations Awareness Week.
So you're managing all the seminarians on top of, if someone is curious about or says they feel a call towards the priesthood or religious life, that's also under your purview as well.
Yeah, so we're an office, we like to say Office of Vocational Discernment, and we're an office that really tries to accompany young people from kind of early stages of thinking about their vocation. And for men called to diocesan priesthood, we're going to accompany you all the way to ordination. So, the vocations office has been walking with some guys who are called to diocesan priesthood for 12 years by the time they get ordained. Yeah. So we really, that's kind of one of the joys of being a vocation director. Some of these guys I really get to know well because I've Well, as long as I've been in this office of vocations, they've been in seminary, or I've known them, because I reached out to them or they reached out to me in like 2018 when I started, and now they're in seminary. And we're still, in communication, talking about their faith, talking about their growth, and trying to talk about how God is really calling them to be that holy priest. So it's a lot of fun in that sense. I get to know some people really well.
You get to accompany them on that journey, which, to have that continuity, you become kind of that physical embodiment of that dedication, that promise, that God will always be there with us, that the church will be there with us. You become that living embodiment for these men as they go through this.
Yeah, I am the representative of the church in those cases. Really, what we say, I'm the representative of the bishop, or Cardinal Donardo in those cases. So he also is somebody who follows, the seminarians' progress through reading these reports and things like that. But at the end of the day, he'll delegate a lot of that. Very grateful for his delegation. A lot of that falls to my responsibility, and I kind of report things to him. So we both look at these seminarians, but I'm probably the one who's going to meet these seminarians annually or twice a year, semi-annually, and things like that, and take care of them during the summers, so that we take that off of all the many responsibilities that Cardinal Donardo has to do. So.
You talk about this process and this journey. I'm curious about your own journey and how you came to the priesthood. Is this something you always wanted or always thought about? I mean, we hear stories from some priests where, I remember playing priest when I was young, and my mother made me, little vestments, and I would, act along all the motions that the priest was doing on the altar. And yeah, I hear others who were, well, no, I hated CCE. I didn't like going to Mass, but in both ways, God ended up calling them to the same vocation. What was your journey like?
So we, in the vocations office, we really do walk with people from the initial stages of that journey. And for everybody who, wants to be a priest or a sister, at some point there was a moment where they had to want to follow Christ, where they have to be a disciple. And so that's kind of where we pick people up. Men and women who are disciples trying to follow the Lord. We have a lot of resources in the vocation office to try to reach them and help them further that journey of discipleship. And so for me, I didn't start discipleship until I was much older. I guess somehow it's funny that I went to Catholic schools for all my life and things like that, but I guess I never really took my faith seriously until I was in college. And I started to have like stirrings of like real desires to commit my life to Jesus. And a lot of that was in response to graces and just experiences of God's love that, I'll treasure for the rest of my life. I remember once, it was really like a Good Friday where we had a new pastor, Father John Wire, was reading out of the diary of St. Faustina, and I heard Jesus tell me that he loved me so clearly. I was crying in church uncontrollably. Like I am embarrassed usually to cry, or certainly I was as a teenager. I guess I might have been 21 at that time. Still embarrassed. And I was so moved by the love of God. I think that's where my discipleship journey really started to take place. I had been taking my faith a little more seriously in college because I had some good friends who were trying to live their faith. They challenged me a lot. And I went to a Catholic college. And so there were some great classes. I was a philosophy major along with business. And some of those philosophy classes really challenged me to think about deep questions in life, like, what is happiness? What is the meaning of life? Who is God? How can I know he's real? And how can I, what is my goal and how can I achieve it? So I guess those things all kind of set me up for this conversion experience, a conversion of heart. And from that time on, I really tried to live my life in a way that was like, I want God in my life and I want to follow Jesus. I want to know him. And I spent a lot of time doing that. So much like I remember after that conversion experience, I was the kind of guy who would get people to pray the Chaplet of Divine Mercy at 3:00. And also I read St. Faustina's diary more than I read my textbooks. And so it didn't go well at finals time. I was kind of, overboard. But it all evened out. And I think at that point in my life, I started to really think about what is God asking me to do? What can I do for God? Because I know how much he loves me now, and I want to love him back. And it wasn't until that point that I really began to ask those questions. So I recognize that, people are in a lot of different points in their faith. It is kind of a journey. Hopefully it ends in heaven, not in hell. But, from the moment of baptism, those people are called to holiness, to God, to union with God. But they're also called and given a mission. And I guess that's the thing, is that they won't begin to really receive that mission until they've reached some of those prerequisites. They've got an open heart. They've started to follow the Lord. And those are the people we work with now. And it's kind of a joy, because I guess I get to work with people who are on fire, for the love of God, just like I was in college, and are looking to find out, what does God want me to do? What can I do for him? Yeah.
Talk about that question, what does God want me to do? We've thrown out the word discernment several times now in our discussion, and I think so many people aren't quite sure what the actual definition is. I think secularly we get this idea that, well, discerning is kind of, okay, I say a prayer and say, God, what do you want me to do? And that it's just a simple, well, I felt in my heart I should be a priest, so I guess I'm supposed to become a priest. But my understanding is it's more of a process, not really a moment.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a moment. I mean, I try to tell people, who are thinking about priesthood, you can't be a priest in a year, not even in 4 years. It takes a long time. And that's built in by the church, because we don't want somebody making a quick decision about being a priest, because we know that the commitment won't be there. That needs to develop, and it just takes a long time to do so. So, if you're going to equip and train somebody to be a leader in the faith, they've got to have pretty strong faith. A lot of guys probably are afraid of priesthood for that reason. They're thinking man, I can't do this. Well, you can't now, but after, 7 or 9 years of training, you probably can, because God can work on a soul, and in that way. Anyway, I guess, I don't know if I answered your question there. I kind of lost them.
I was discerning your response, so it's okay.
but to say something about discernment, we've actually tried to start to use the word discover. And I haven't changed my language, because I'm still using the word discernment. But we want to put it out there that really discernment is discovery of your mission. And you're right that discovery, it's not a one-time thing. It's something that I think people don't even realize, but it happens in the seminary, really. That's why we put you in a program for that long, is that, guys who go to seminary are pretty convinced that they're called, but they need to further discern that as they discover more about who God is, who they are, and things like that. But discovery starts, again, with that turn to discipleship. I want to follow the Lord. And it needs some prerequisites. You have to have an open heart, and you have to have that attitude of I want to do what God wants. Not everybody has that. You probably also need a prayer life. You need some silence in your prayer life. The prayer life needs to be committed. We don't find guys who are, or women for that matter, who are called to religious life or priesthood, who, go to Sunday Mass once a month, who pray before meals only. That's not the stage of people who want to commit their life to Jesus, because then they're going to go from that to multiple daily masses and hours of prayer.
Just give them the multi-volume breviary and just watch their head spin.
That's right. Figure out these ribbons.
I guess that's something I wanted to ask about as well. I know your office also deals with women who are discerning religious life. How is that process different in discernment, or is there a difference in that discernment process for men and women?
I think it's a lot. It's very similar. The one thing from our perspective as people who are trying to guide and accompany, we can't accompany women as far because we don't have a diocesan seminary for women. We don't have a convent. So in that case, we try to help women hear that call to dedicate their lives to the Lord, to consecrate themselves. But then in what community or what capacity, we don't really have a say in that. It'd be the same as, if somebody wanted to get married, at some point they need to start dating somebody. They need to find the other person and discern that with them.
Being married myself, I found dating helped quite a lot.
Good. I mean, Sean, you would never say like, I prayed in a room for 8 hours. I've discovered my call is marriage, and now I'm done. No, you need to go find the person you're going to get married to, and then they need to agree to this. Like it's not okay, God has shown me all these signs. I'm called to marry this person. Well, that's great, but he needs to tell them the same thing, or you're not getting married. It's kind of like that in any other version of consecrated life or priesthood. With diocesan priests, you discern, with the help of the cardinal here, and myself and the admissions board, and the seminaries. When you're entering or thinking about religious life, you have to discern with the community. And so I think that's where we don't really have the next steps for the young women who are thinking about committing themselves to Jesus. Well, it's like, now we need to find you a community. But I don't do that finding, you do. And there's so many out there, I can't really walk you through that process. There's some initial guidance that we can give, but otherwise, I think that's where we kind of say prayers for the woman and goodbye, and they walk that part with somebody else.
I think helping someone, male or female, to discern, their gifts, their talents, where God has given them, those opportunities that kind of match up with the charisms of a particular order or a particular ministry, whether that's diocesan or whatever. I think there's a real opportunity within there that your office kind of takes a moment to not necessarily point them to where they should be, but to help them assess. So if you're here at A, maybe B is the next place you should be going.
Yeah. We don't want to, I don't want to make it sound like we don't have any, guidance for women at that point. We try to tell them, how to listen to the voice of God. And then from there, we point them in the right direction. We don't just say like, good luck,
Now, if someone was interested and felt like, okay, well, maybe God is calling me to the priesthood or religious life, how would they, what would be the first step for them? Do they call you? Do they start with their parish priest? Do they find, whoever the vocation sort of lay representative is in their parish? How do they get started on that process?
I think they can reach out to our office. We have a website, we have email. They can follow us on social media and things like that. But really, communication would be great. We don't have an overwhelming amount of requests for guidance. It's true that we can't guide somebody for 6 months. We couldn't have, we just don't have the resources to be able to do this long term for a lot of people. But in terms of one email and one conversation might be enough for us to point you in the right direction and say okay, I think it would be good if you got more involved in your parish, or this spiritual director is really good, work with them, or here's a great retreat for you. We usually, actually, this is our thing in the office. We just try to point out the next step. We just need you to take the next step. We don't need you to make decisions usually or sign up on the dotted line. Just take the next step.
You have had a variety of ministry opportunities within the diocese at different parishes and doing different things. What is it about vocations ministry in your role now? What is it for you that you find just edifying and rewarding?
Like I said, working with seminarians, watching them through that process has been really beautiful. When I go to ordination, I know how much went into that moment, how much suffering on the part of the man, how much waiting, how much change, how much grace. And so those are really beautiful moments, having worked with this man. And then finally being able to see him receive that gift from the Lord is a tremendous joy. I think there are other joys. I really enjoy working with the young church. I like to say, and maybe this is a topic for some other time, there are some things I see that I think most people don't get to see. I know there are a lot of people out there who worry about the church, maybe a kind of a generation above me, baby boomers or Gen Xers. Sometimes I hear them talk about vocations or the church, and there's a lot of crisis and urgency in their language. But when I look at the young church, I don't see that. I don't see a lot of room for fear or reasons to worry. I know that people are like, hey, my son and daughter doesn't practice the faith. But what I see, because of who I work with, are these young people who are alive with the Holy Spirit and well into their faith, who will change the world, because you don't need that many grains of salt to flavor, something to season it. And there's just so much out there. Like sometimes I go, like I was at the University of Texas yesterday, walking around through their student center and the campus.
Father Jonathan
Rea,
who was originally from Houston.
That is correct.
And in fact, I actually did part of my undergrad with him at UT years ago. But he's doing great stuff out there at the Catholic Center.
He is. And, it's true that not every student is on fire. And there are a lot of reasons, like if you go to that school, that, you could lose your faith. But there's also this bastion of discipleship right on the edge of the bell tower of campus here. And it's just reasons to really hope. Certainly the same could be said of like Texas A&M and a lot of, these colleges like UST and things in our own Houston area. There's just a lot of hope. I think these schools where young people are kind of nurtured are now areas where you could grow in faith, whereas they probably weren't, 10 or 20 years ago. And things like that just make me really hopeful that, like, I don't care what trials are going to come, they're not going to be able to stamp out, God's movement in the young people.
Last question. I know you have to go, but for the average person just listening, maybe they personally don't feel a call to priesthood or religious life. Maybe they're already married with children. What can they do? What's one or two simple things they can do to promote vocations?
Sure. One is to pray. So I know that sounds, I want to use the word banal. Like it sounds pretty common. It sounds pretty mediocre or menial.
It almost sounds like it's too simple and too easy.
Yeah, but that's exactly where we all need to start and sometimes stay. Prayer really is, communion with God, beseeching God for things. That's where it starts and that's where it finishes. God is going to be the one who raises up people to the priesthood. I don't give people their vocations. I don't call them. God does. So I really want to ask people to pray for this. Certainly their support in other ways is welcomed. We do run off of things like DSF or the Corpus Christi collection. We're very grateful for all of our benefactors, including like the Scanlon Foundation, who helps us out so much. And there are probably some volunteer opportunities, to be honest, that, as a parish, once a parish priest, I knew that so many of the parishioners ran things. And here in the Chancery Department, we don't have people who run things other than the paid employees. And we're not enough. Like, we just can't do this alone. So there are parish vocation committees. There are other opportunities to serve. And they could contact our office asking us, hey, how can I serve? We'd love for people to collaborate with.
And a lot of this information is available on the website, which is
HoustonVocations.com.
HoustonVocations.com. And you can also follow Houston Vocations on social media to keep up to date on upcoming events, ways that you can get involved, prayers, highlights of some of our seminarians who are scattered throughout the 6 seminaries preparing, God willing, for the priesthood. Reminding everyone that's not only a discernment for them, but a discernment for Cardinal and for the diocese as well. So we just ask for prayers all around. Father, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Sean. It's been a pleasure.
Really appreciate it. And as always, if you want to learn more about the ministries and offices of the Archdiocese, you can find us online at archgh.org. That's archgh.org. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time here on Around the Archdiocese.